All right, so we're back to Dragon Age Veilguard. Remember that review we talked about last time? He crashed harder than a newbie mage trying to cast a master spell.
Yeah, it was rough. Glitches galore, combat that felt like wading through molasses, the whole 9 yards.
Right, and we were all wondering if they could, salvage this train wreck.
Yep.
But hold on to your asses, folks, because shit just hit the fan. Big time.
Oh, yeah. What happened?
The internet, bless its chaotic soul, did what it does best. It exploded. Remember that site? What will Joni text? Some poor bastard posted a review after just a few hours of gameplay, and it's a goddamn masterpiece of rage. Let me give you a taste. Terrible graphics, boring and monotonous combat. They want to copy God of War, but in a bad way. The game does not run at a constant 30 FPS. I mean, damn.
Straight to the point, huh?
Yeah.
No holding back.
Not even a little. And get this, many of the dialogues are noticeably made with AI. Very linear, the options lead nowhere. The characters move very robotic, they lack animations. The script doesn't make sense, neither do the quests. From one place to another killing bugs. It's like a laundry list of everything wrong with the game.
Sounds like they were ready to chuck their PC out the window. But it's interesting that they're pissed about the writing and the quests, too. It's not just the technical stuff.
Oh, trust me, it gets so much worse. Brace yourself for this gem. Too much focus on homosexuality, lesbians, drags, race swap everywhere. It's a fucking piece of garbage as an RPG. Stay away from this game. Don't even buy it on sale. It's a pile of putrefaction created by people who have no fucking idea about video games. Uninstalled already, fuck your mother.
I'm surprised their keyboard survived.
Whoa. Okay, that's a whole other level of angry.
Right. It's like they channeled the spirit of 1,000 scorned gamers into that review.
But seriously, that kind of rage, it's not just about a buggy game. It feels like something else is going on. Like this game poked a hornet's nest of anxieties. And this was just the tip of the iceberg. Things went full nuclear on Reddit, specifically the Asmongold subreddit. There's this thread titled, DA Veilguard, they are aiming for dustborne levels of cringe. And let me tell you, it's like a dumpster fire in a toxic waste dump.
Dustborn. Ah, yes. That game became the poster child for the whole get woke, go broke crowd. A lot of gamers saw it as sacrificing gameplay on the altar of social justice.
Yep, and comparing Veilguard to Dustborn, that's basically a death sentence in some circles, like abandon all hope ye who enter here.
So if even Asmongold's fans are turning on it, that's not a good sign. What are they saying?
The top comment pretty much sums up the vibes that I don't understand the logic. Like, if you're transgender, wouldn't you just make a character of the sex you identify as? I don't think anyone who deals with gender dysphoria wants to make being trans their identity. Feels like it's people just posing and pandering to a sort of false assumption of these kind of people.
So right off the bat, we're seeing this pushback against how the game handled transgender characters. This idea that it's forced, inauthentic, pandering to some imagined audience.
And it's not just that one comment. The whole thread is filled with people arguing about whether trans identity should even be a factor in character creation versus just letting players play as whatever gender they identify with.
That's a really interesting debate, actually. Because on the surface, it seems like a simple concept. Just let people play as whoever they want. But then you get into the complexities of representation and whether simply allowing a choice is enough to make a game truly inclusive.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. And then you've got this other layer of anger. Folks straight up accusing the devs of trying to push an agenda, of shoving woke ideology down their throats.
Right. This idea that the game is more concerned with ticking diversity boxes than delivering a solid gaming experience, that's a common thread in these kinds of controversies.
And the language. Forget subtle shade. This is full-on scorched earth. I'm talking this game is a dumpster fire. The writing is absolute garbage. This is what happens when you let SJWs make games.
It's important to acknowledge that while we're diving into this mess, we don't endorse any hateful or discriminatory language.
Absolutely. But we can't ignore it either. This stuff is out there, and it's part of the conversation, whether we like it or not. And it's not just about the trans rep either. People are tearing into the writing in general. Forced dialogue choices, characters who sound like they're reading from a political pamphlet instead of, actually being people in a fantasy world. It's a mess.
There's a real sense of betrayal in these comments, like the devs took something they loved and twisted it into something unrecognizable, something that feels more like a lecture than an escape. And it's fascinating how often they bring up Dustborn. It's like that game has become shorthand for everything they fear in modern gaming.
It's the boogeyman, the cautionary tale. Like, see what happens when you get too woke, you end up with Dustborn. And nobody wants that.
Right. It represents this fear that their favorite pastime is being hijacked, turned into a platform for political messaging instead of the escapist fantasy they crave.
And that's where things get really interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, you've got this vocal group of gamers who are clearly pissed off and feeling alienated. But then you have the other side of the coin, the folks who are actually craving that representation,
Yeah.
who want to see themselves reflected in the games they play.
Exactly. And that's where we're going to pick up in the next segment, because this is a clash of perspectives, a battle for the soul of gaming, and it's only getting started. It's a tough spot for developers to be in. Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah, it's like walking a tightrope over a pit of angry internet trolls. One wrong step and you're toast. But speaking of things that are pissing people off, there's this whole other layer to this shitstorm that we need to unpack. The whole immersion breaking thing.
Ah, yes. The classic gamer complaint. Ruins the whole fantasy, apparently.
For real. People are losing their minds over how the dialogue feels forced and unnatural. Like they're stuck in some cheesy PSA instead of a world of magic and dragons.
Well, you got to remember, for a lot of gamers, these fantasy worlds are their escape, right? They want to leave behind the real world with all its drama and bullshit.
It's like their happy place, their safe space.
Exactly. And when they feel like real-world issues are being shoved in their face, especially in a way that feels preachy or heavy-handed, it shatters that illusion. It's like finding a Starbucks in the middle of ancient Rome.
Right. It's like, dude, I'm here to slay demons and collect loot, not have a lecture on gender identity.
Precisely. And that's where things get really complicated. Because on the flip side, you have people who are desperate for that representation, who want to see themselves reflected in the games they love.
Yeah, they want to feel seen, to feel like they belong in these worlds.
Exactly. And for marginalized groups who are often ignored or stereotyped in media, that kind of representation can be incredibly powerful.
So you've got these two sides with completely different needs and expectations, clashing head on. It's a recipe for disaster.
And that's exactly what we're seeing play out online, this raw, unfiltered anger and frustration.
And let's be real, some of these comments are straight up nasty, like next level toxicity.
It's a shame, but it's also a symptom of how deeply people feel about this stuff. It's not just about pixels on a screen. It's about identity, about belonging, about what kind of world we want to live in.
Okay, but can we talk about the immersion breaking thing for a sec?
Yeah.
Because it's one thing to say the dialogue is bad, but people are pointing to specific examples in the game that are just bizarre.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Well, this week keeps coming up. There's this scene where your character is in the middle of a quest, right? Like the fate of the world is hanging in the balance, and suddenly they stop to have a deep philosophical conversation with an NPC about gender identity. It's so out of place, it's almost comical.
Whoa. Yeah, that does seem like a weird time for a TED Talk.
Right. And the way the dialogue is written, it's so clunky and unnatural. It's like the writers were trying to check off a box on a diversity checklist instead of creating an actual conversation between believable characters.
It's like those after-school specials, where they try to cram every social issue into a 30-minute episode.
Exactly. And then there's this other example where you're forced to choose between siding with a trans character or a more traditional character in this big conflict. And no matter what you choose, the dialogue feels so preachy and moralizing, like you're being lectured to about the right way to think.
Ah, the classic forced choice dilemma. That can really backfire if it's not handled with a lot of nuance. Because gamers hate feeling like they're being told what to think or feel.
Especially in a game that's supposed to be about choice and agency. It's like, hey, I thought I was the hero of this story, not a pawn in your political chess game.
And that's the challenge, isn't it? How do you create a game that's both inclusive and engaging, that tackles complex social issues without sacrificing the core elements that make games fun and immersive?
Is it even possible? I mean, are we just screwed at this point? Is the gaming world doomed to be this endless battleground of outrage and division?
I don't think it's hopeless. I mean, there are developers out there who are doing amazing things, who are finding creative ways to weave diverse perspectives and complex themes into their games without sacrificing quality or entertainment value.
Okay, but how? What's the secret sauce? Is it just about good writing?
It's definitely part of it, creating characters that feel real and relatable, regardless of their background or identity, writing dialogue that feels natural and organic, that flows from the characters and the story, rather than being forced or preachy.
So basically, Stop sucking at storytelling.
Pretty much. But it's more than that. It's about having empathy, about understanding the perspectives of people who are different from you. It's about being willing to listen and learn, even when it's uncomfortable.
Sounds like a tall order for a bunch of dudes who spend most of their time coding and designing levels.
It is a challenge, but it's a challenge worth facing. Because games have the power to do so much more than just entertain us. They can connect us, they can challenge us, they can make us think and feel in ways that few other mediums can.
So is this Dragon Age? Veilguard debacle, a sign that gaming is finally growing up, that it's ready to grapple with the complexities of the real world?
It's hard to say. It could be a turning point, or it could just be another blip in the endless cycle of hype and outrage. But either way, it's a conversation that we need to have.
So what's the takeaway here? Is Dragon Age Veilguard the canary in the coal mine? Is this a sign that the gaming world is about to implode?
It's definitely a symptom of a larger shift that's been happening for a while now. Gaming is evolving, audiences are changing, and the old rules just don't apply anymore.
Yeah, it's not just a bunch of dudes in their basements anymore. It's a global phenomenon, a multi-billion-dollar industry, a legitimate art form. And with that comes a whole new set of responsibilities and expectations.
Exactly. And those expectations are coming from both sides. You've got gamers who are demanding more inclusive and diverse experiences, who want to see themselves reflected in the games they play. And then you've got gamers who are clinging to the idea of gaming as a pure escape, a refuge from the messiness of the real world.
And those two visions, they're clashing hard, like tectonic plates colliding, creating this massive earthquake of outrage and debate.
And it's happening everywhere, not just in Dragon Age. Veilguard. Look at the backlash against The Last of Us Part 2, the controversy surrounding Battlefield V, the never-ending arguments about representation in Call of Duty. It's a constant tension, a struggle to define what gaming is and who it's for.
So are we doomed to this endless cycle of outrage and division? Is there any hope for a gaming world where everyone feels welcome and represented?
I think there is hope, but it's going to take a conscious effort from both developers and gamers. Developers need to be more thoughtful and nuanced in how they approach these issues, and gamers need to be more open-minded and willing to engage in good faith.
Okay, but how do we actually make that happen? It's easy to say, be more thoughtful or be more open-minded, but how do we translate that into real change?
It starts with dialogue, with having these difficult conversations, even when they're uncomfortable, with listening to each other, trying to understand where the other side is coming from, and finding common ground.
That sounds great in theory. But have you spent any time on gaming forums lately? It's a cesspool of toxicity and bad faith arguments.
I know it's not easy, but it's necessary. We can't just give up and let the loudest voices dominate the conversation. We need to amplify the voices of reason, the voices of empathy, the voices that are calling for a more inclusive and welcoming gaming world.
So what's our role in all this? I mean, we're just a couple of podcasters talking about video games. Can we actually make a difference?
I think we can, by having these conversations, by shedding light on these issues, by encouraging critical thinking and empathy. We can contribute to a more positive and constructive dialogue. We can help bridge the divide, one conversation at a time.
All right, so let's wrap this up. Dragon Age. Veilguard, it's a mess. It's buggy, it's poorly written, and it's sparked a firestorm of controversy. But maybe, just maybe, it can be a catalyst for change, a wake-up call for the gaming industry, and a reminder that we need to do better, to be better.
It's a high bar, for sure. But if gaming is truly going to reach its full potential as a force for good, as a medium that can connect and inspire us, then we need to rise to the challenge.
So to all the gamers out there, no matter what your perspective,
Right.
let's try to have this conversation with a little more respect and understanding. Because at the end of the day, we're all just trying to find our place in this crazy, beautiful world of gaming. And that's something we can all agree on.